Why are you here? My mother stepped directly in front of me before I could reach the university entrance. I stopped, still holding the graduation card and small wrapped gift I'd driven 6 hours to give my younger brother. Mom, we told you not to come, she said. Before I could answer, Dad moved beside her. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked angry. Families in graduation clothes streamed around us while Dad pointed toward the parking lot. This is Ethan's day, Clarice. Leave. My fingers tightened around the gift. Did Ethan tell you he doesn't want me here? Neither of them answered. That was when something shifted. Because if my brother had actually banned me from his graduation, why couldn't they simply say so? Mom glanced toward the university doors. You have a habit of making family occasions complicated. How? By showing up. Dad lowered his voice. Don't embarrass your brother by creating a scene. I stared at him. I was 29 years old, standing outside my own brother's graduation after driving 6 hours to support him, and somehow I was being treated like an intruder. Their earlier comments suddenly came back to me. Give Ethan some space. Let this weekend be about him. I'd thought it was the usual favoritism. Ethan had always been the child they protected, while I was the one expected to understand, compromise, and help whenever something went wrong. But an actual ban? I looked at Mom again. Just tell me one thing. Did Ethan ask you to keep me away? She adjusted her purse instead of answering. Dad pointed toward the parking lot again. Go home, Clarice. I could have pushed harder. I could have called Ethan right there. But if he truly didn't want me there, I wasn't going to turn his graduation into a confrontation. So I walked back to my car. I placed his unopened gift on the passenger seat and started the 6-hour drive home. 4 mile after mile, one question followed me. Why had my parents seemed more afraid of me getting inside than of Ethan seeing me? I got my answer, or at least the beginning of it, 2 days later. My phone rang. Mom. I answered cautiously. Hello. She barely mentioned the graduation. Clarice, your father and I need to talk to you about something. What? A short pause, then she said, we need the $25,000 you saved for your house. I actually pulled the phone away from my ear. 2 days earlier, I hadn't been family enough to attend my brother's graduation. Now they wanted every dollar I had saved for my future. And suddenly, I wondered whether those two things were connected. $25,000? I repeated. Mom answered as if she'd asked me to pick up groceries. Yes. I stood in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear, staring at the folder on my counter where I kept the paperwork for the houses I'd been viewing. What exactly do you need it for? There was a pause. It's for Ethan, she finally said. He needs it more than you need a house right now. I almost laughed, but nothing about it felt funny yet. For years, I had been the dependable child. When something broke, when an unexpected bill appeared, when Ethan needed help while he was still getting established, my parents called me. And usually I helped. That $25,000 was different. I had built it slowly over time shifts, skipped vacations, careful budgets, month after month of telling myself that every sacrifice was getting me closer to having a place of my own. And Ethan had already benefited from my money. During his final year, I'd quietly helped with textbooks, rent, and other expenses whenever Mom told me they were struggling. I never resented Ethan for it. I wanted him to graduate without being buried in debt, but Mom and Dad almost never acknowledged where that help came from. Now, standing in my kitchen, several conversations suddenly sounded different. Months earlier, Mom had asked, "How much have you saved for the house now?" Then she'd asked again weeks later. Dad had once laughed and said, "At least you have a stable job. If you ever spend your savings, you can always build it back." And shortly before graduation, he had asked whether my $25,000 was sitting somewhere I could access immediately. At the time, I'd called him nosy. Now Mom was asking for the exact amount. "Family should matter more than property, Clarice," she said sharply. That sentence snapped something into focus. "You wouldn't even let me watch Ethan graduate." Silence. I continued, "Why am I suddenly family when you need $25,000? Nothing." "Mom, you're being dramatic." "No, I'm asking where my money is going." "I already told you. Ethan needs it." "For what?" Another pause. "That was enough. I'm not transferring anything until you tell me exactly what this money is for." Her voice hardened. After everything this family has done for you, then answering one question should be easy. You know what, Clarice? Forget it. The call ended. I stared at the screen. Normally, that would have been the moment I called her back. I would have apologized just to restore the peace. Instead, I opened my contacts. There was one person I should have spoken to 2 days earlier. I found my brother's name, and for the first time since my parents ordered me out of his graduation, I called Ethan directly. Ethan answered on the third ring. Clarice. He sounded genuinely happy. Then, before I could even explain why I was calling, he asked the one question that changed everything. Why didn't you come Saturday? I went completely still. What? My graduation, he said. Why didn't you come? For a second, neither of us spoke. Then I asked carefully, Ethan, did you tell Mom and Dad you didn't want me there? What? No. My stomach dropped. I was there. What do you mean? I drove 6 hours. I got to the university before the ceremony. Mom and Dad stopped me outside. Ethan's voice changed. Stopped you how? They told me to leave. Dad said it was your day. They made it sound like you wanted me gone. No one told me you were even there. That erased the last excuse I'd been making for our parents. Then Ethan said, actually, something weird happened after graduation. I gripped the phone tighter. What? At the celebration, Dad gave this whole speech. In front of our relatives' friends, Dad had talked about how much he and Mom had sacrificed to put Ethan through college. Then came the big moment. Dad handed Ethan a card. Inside was a promise from our parents, $25,000 toward graduate school. Everyone applauded. I said nothing. Clarice, when did they promise you that? Saturday. 2 days before Mom called demanding my house savings, the exact same amount. Mom called me this morning, I said slowly. What about? She asked me for $25,000. Silence. Then Ethan said, wait, the money I saved for my house. No, that can't be. Dad asked me before graduation whether the money was immediately accessible. Ethan stopped talking. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed. He had sent me a photograph from the celebration. Dad stood in the middle of our relatives holding the card like a trophy. I zoomed in. There it was, $25,000 from Mom and Dad. I felt sick. They had publicly promised money they apparently expected me to provide, but Ethan noticed something else. Clarice, Dad told everyone they paid for most of my final year too. My eyes moved from the photograph to the banking app on my phone because I knew that wasn't true. Ethan's voice dropped. Clarice, how much of my college expenses did you actually pay? I didn't answer Ethan immediately, not because I couldn't remember, because I could. Clarice, I helped with more than you know. The line went quiet. I opened my banking app while I spoke. Your textbooks, part of your rent, a few other expenses during your final year. What? Whenever Mom said they were struggling, I sent money. Ethan sounded stunned. Why didn't you tell me? Because Mom asked me not to. I could still hear her explanation every time I'd offered to send the money directly to Ethan. Don't embarrass him. Let us handle it. He doesn't need to know. I had believed she was protecting my brother's pride. Now I wasn't so sure. Ethan started listing expenses Dad had claimed to cover. Remember my rent payment in October? I searched my transactions. There it was, a transfer to Mom days earlier. Ethan named another expense. I found another transfer, then another. The dates lined up. My parents had accepted money from me, used it toward Ethan's expenses, and allowed him to believe they had paid those bills themselves. Send me those, Ethan said. Are you sure? Yes. So I did. Screenshots of the transfers. Then I forwarded Mom's message demanding my $25,000. Ethan went silent. I'm calling them, he finally said. Ethan. The call ended. Less than 10 minutes later, Mom's name flashed across my screen. I answered. What did you tell your brother? She snapped. The truth. You've turned him against us. You're destroying his graduation memories because you're bitter about Saturday. Then Dad came onto the call. We are not doing this, Clarice. Then tell me why you promised Ethan $25,000 you don't have. His response told me everything. We cannot withdraw that promise now. The whole family knows about it. There it was. Not Ethan needs help. Not we're in trouble. The whole family knows. Their reputation depended on my money. And suddenly the pattern became painfully simple. My savings had never looked like mine to them. Every dollar I managed not to spend was just money they believed they could claim later. Dad's voice hardened. Enough. Are you transferring the money or not? I opened my mouth to answer. Then I heard a door slam through their end of the phone. Footsteps. Mom said, "Ethan." And my brother's voice came through clearly. "No, Dad, don't hang up. I want to hear Clarice's answer, too." Ethan had walked into their house. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Ethan said, "Put Clarice on speaker." Mom's voice tightened. "Ethan, this is between us and your sister. No. You made it about me when you promised me her money." I heard movement, then Dad's voice became clearer. "Watch how you speak to your mother." Ethan didn't back down. "Did you tell Clarice I didn't want her at my graduation?" Silence. "Dad, we wanted you to have your own day." "That's not what I asked." Mom jumped in. "We were trying to prevent unnecessary tension." "What tension?" "Clarice showing up." Nobody answered him. Ethan continued. "And the money you gave me during my final year, how much of that actually came from Clarice?" Mom tried to interrupt. "Ethan, you don't understand. I saw the transfers." That stopped her. I sat at my kitchen table listening as the story my parents had carefully maintained began collapsing. They had accepted my money whenever Ethan needed help, then presented themselves as the ones making the sacrifices. They had kept me away from graduation while Dad publicly celebrated everything he and Mom had supposedly done for Ethan. And at the celebration they had promised him another $25,000 they didn't have. My $25,000. The money I had spent years saving for my first home. Ethan's voice shook with anger. "So, you stopped the person who actually helped me graduate from coming inside, then stood in front of everybody and took credit for helping me." Mom answered quickly, "We wanted you to feel supported. You could have supported me without treating my sister like she was disposable." Dad exhaled sharply. "This has gotten completely out of proportion." "No," I said. "It's finally exactly the right size." Dad turned his attention back to me. "Clarice, you have a good job. You're 29. You can save another $25,000. I stared at the house listings spread across my table. That sentence should have made me angry. Instead, something inside me finally became calm because Dad had just admitted the part I'd spent years refusing to see. My parents believed that because I was responsible, I should pay for everyone who wasn't. Every overtime shift, every vacation I skipped, every month I budgeted carefully. To them, none of it represented my future. It represented available family money. Dad spoke again. "Are you transferring it or not?" And I laughed. Mom gasped softly. "What is funny? You banned me from his graduation," I said, then called me 2 days later to make me pay for the gift you took credit for. "Clarice, no." "Dad, you made the promise." I looked at the balance in my savings account. "Keep your promise. Just use your own money." Mom actually gasped. "You would really do this to your brother?" Before I could answer, Ethan did. "She isn't doing anything to me." Another silence. "I don't want the money," he said. Dad snapped. "Don't be ridiculous." "I mean it. If that $25,000 was supposed to come from Clarice, I don't want it." "But everyone already knows about the gift," Mom said. Ethan gave a short, humorless laugh. "Then tell them the truth." That was the consequence my parents had been trying desperately to avoid. Without my savings, there was no $25,000 graduate school gift. Eventually, relatives started asking questions. Mom and Dad had no choice but to admit the promised money wasn't happening. And when people asked Ethan privately what had gone wrong, he stopped protecting the story our parents had created. He explained that I had helped with several of his college expenses. He told them I had driven 6 hours to attend his graduation, and he told them our parents had sent me away. The image Dad had built during his graduation speech didn't survive contact with the facts. I made another change, too. I stopped being the family emergency account. When Mom called weeks later and tried to slide another financial request into the conversation, I stopped her. If this call is about money, the answer is no. Our relationship became distant after that. I didn't cut my parents out completely, but I stopped allowing money to determine whether I was treated like family. Ethan and I had a different conversation. "I'm sorry," he told me. "I had no idea you were paying for those things." You weren't supposed to know. I should have. I shook my head. They lied to both of us. I'm not blaming you for believing them. For the first time in years, our relationship existed without mom and dad controlling what each of us knew about the other. And the $25,000? It stayed exactly where it belonged with me. Months later, I stood in the living room of my first home surrounded by half-open boxes. Ethan arrived carrying food and helped me unpack. At one point, he looked around and smiled. So, this is what the famous $25,000 became. I ran my hand along the kitchen counter. Part of it, no regrets. I thought about that parking lot. Dad pointing toward my car. Mom asking why I had come. The 6-hour drive home with Ethan's unopened graduation gift beside me. Then I looked around at something I had built through my own discipline. None. My parents lost the financial safety net they had assumed would always be available. I gained something more valuable than their approval. I finally understood that being useful to people was not the same thing as being valued by them. And I stopped measuring my place in my family by whether my parents chose to include me. They made me drive 6 hours home because they said I didn't belong at my brother's graduation. 2 days later, they discovered my $25,000 didn't belong to them either.